Happy Veterans Day. Also, happy National Metal Day for any hard rock heavy metal head who knows also not only is it Veterans Day but National Metal Day. Well, happy Veterans Day and National Metal Day to everybody out there. And I know it's a little early to be doing this video, but I figured since there are no more albums left on the album schedule that have any interest to me of checking out, I got a list right here. The top 25 albums of 2014. Now, this is 25 albums with 5 honorable mentions. So really, it's kind of like a top 30 list almost. So yeah, technically top 30, but it's really top 25 with 5 honorable mentions. Now, let's get to those honorable mentions real quick. So technically starting at number 30, we've got Dragon Force with Maximum Overload. This album came out during the summer, and it was a highly anticipated release for any fan of power metal or crazy neoclassical kind of heavy metal. Dragon Force decided to take what they were able to do in the past, but bring in a lot more thrash metal and progressive metal influence into their power metal sound, and it worked out for them. I mean, when you got songs like The Game and The Sun Is Dead, and their cover of Ring of Fire for Johnny Cash, very interesting way to do it, and that's why the album made the honorable mentions list. And the only reason it didn't strike up the list is because there were only 2 songs I really loved, while there were other great songs on there. The replay value just wasn't there too much for that particular album. Number 29, we've got Exodus with Blood In, Blood Out. This was a solid thrash release, I will give him that. With the return of Steve Zetro Sousa, it was very immense for him, and his voice sounds a little more guttural now compared to what he was able to do in the past, but then again, that's probably because he's getting older. But still a very good album, but the only reason it didn't make the list is because I thought it was a little bit lengthy and there was a couple of subpar songs. But that doesn't deny the fact that it was still a very good album nonetheless. So number 28, we've got the Melvins with Hold It In. Yeah, the Melvins, that little band from Seattle, the sludge metal act, who's now been really incorporating a lot of experimental rock to their sludge metal sound by having a couple members from the Butthole Surfers participate on the album, where there's some fast songs, some more doomy, sludgy songs. But overall, it was just very well done, and having Buzz Osborne share vocal duties with the guys from Butthole Surfers, even though Buzz's stuff was the best, there was still other good stuff on this album. Number 27, Slipknot with .5 The Gray Chapter. Yes, it made the honorable mention. It's because, for once, for a Slipknot album, I mean, I was a big Slipknot fan when I was younger, but then once I discovered much better bands and better music, Slipknot pretty much fell out of my radar for a long time. But I knew when this album was coming out, I needed to check it out just to see where they were going to be going, considering what has happened to Slipknot in the past 4 or 5 years, with Paul Gray dying and now Joey Jordison not a part of the band, so they had a new bass player and a new drummer. But this album arguably could be said to be Slipknot's best album since probably Iowa or something like that. But I thought there was still excuse me. But I thought there was still some decent stuff. Hell, I thought All Hope Is Gone was pretty good. But Volume 3, I liked a couple songs on it, but like most of the stuff was kind of meh. And sorry if I still sound a little nasally. I'm almost better, but it's just still there a little bit. And then number 26, the last honorable mention, is Godsmack with 1000 HP. No, not huge penises, 1000 horsepower. For a return album from Godsmack, this was a great album, and And the only reason why it didn't make the list is because there were 25 other better ones that came out after this. But Godsmack 1000 Horsepower was a heavy album. Their heaviest stuff since probably Faceless or something like that. Maybe even 4, even though 4 was a little bit more geared towards a traditional blues rock to a traditional heavy metal sound to it. But this album kind of mixes in everything they've done in their career all in the one, and it was a great CD. But now we get to the top 25 list, so there you go. So starting off at number 25, we've got the very first album that came out this year, Iced Earth, Plagues of Babylon, the first album of 2014 for heavy metal that was mentionable, made the cut. It made the list. Iced Earth, Plagues of Babylon. Iced Earth takes their thrash, progressive, power metal sound and just went crazy on the... I mean, the second half of the album, you had some good stuff, but that first half, wow. With that whole concept idea of, like, the Babylon fights and stuff, it made for some interesting storytelling and some heavy-ass songs. And some great songs at that, too. So, yeah, that is why it made the list at number 25. Number 24, Autopsy with Tourniquets, Hacksaws, and Graves. Wow. You want to talk about gruesome, gory stuff. This was some pretty brutal death metal with a doom metal variety to it. I mean, Autopsy combines all their influences. Death metal, grindcore, doom metal, all mix it into like a gore fest package that they put with this album. I mean, when you got their self-titled band track Autopsy on this album, and it was a great song, holy shit, do you have a really solid release with this. Not to say that the other songs were any slouch. There were other great songs, but that song, Autopsy, wow. Number 23, Sabaton with Heroes. Now, this was an album I reviewed late, but I still reviewed it. Oh, and also, as you will keep seeing on the screens, the annotations here to click on the review itself to watch the review for yourself. But Sabaton Heroes was a great album for me because Sabaton is one of those very unique Swedish bands. They're taking influences from power metal and traditional heavy metal, mixing them into their own sound, where they've got some great storytelling lyrics of past wars like World War I, World War II, stuff like that. But they also, even though they didn't do one on this album, but with Sabaton, they can do some pretty cool, like metal tribute songs, like Metal Machine, Metal Crew, and stuff like that. They didn't do one on this album, which kind of sucks, but hey, the whole album I thought was a great CD. Number 22, Vader with Tibi et Ingi. For a Polish death metal band, this was a great CD right here. I mean, when you got songs like Triumph of Death and a bunch of brutal, fast, blast beat songs, then you've got a great album right here with Vader. Now, already on this list for the actual top 25, 2 death metal albums I've mentioned. So there you go. Number 22, or not 22, number 21, we've got Killer Be Killed's self-titled debut. A supergroup band that features Max Cavalera, formerly of Sepultura and Soulfly and Cavalera Conspiracy. Hold on. So, yeah, Max Cavalera, Greg from Dillinger Escape Plan, Troy from Mastodon, and I forget the drummer's name, but he was from Mars Volta. And they all come together, and they put out a hell of a debut album. This was a great debut for a supergroup like Killer Be Killed. I expect more great stuff to come from this band here in the next couple of years whenever they come out with new material. Number 20, Body Count's Manslaughter. Now, Body Count is Ice-T, who is a famous rapper and famous for being Detective Finn Tutuola in Law & Order Special Victims Unit. This is his rap/thrash metal band. And Manslaughter was just a hell of an album for Ice-T and his members to pull. I mean, when they do a hilarious cover of Suicidal Tendencies Institutionalized with goofy, current-day kind of story lyrics, boy, it just tells you how cool this album can be. Number 19, we get to the teens, and actually in number 20, My Age. But number 19, we've got Prong's Ruining Lives. Prong is one of those very underrated heavy metal bands that came out in the latter part of the 1980s and got some of their success in the 1990s thanks to Headbangers Ball and ECW. But Prong is still able to show that they could still put out some damn good CDs, and this album was, wow, a heavy album where you get blast beats from a groovy thrash metal band. You're getting blast beats on a song or two. Excuse me. But yeah, that is why it is number 19. Number 18, Fozzy, Do You Want to Start a War? Now, for Chris Jericho's band Fozzy, while this is not my favorite Fozzy album, it's up there, probably maybe my second or third favorite by them, but this was a great album as well. I mean, whenever you have songs such as Scarecrow, One Crazed Anarchist, and Witchery, which are my three favorite tracks on this album, and then you have other great songs like their song Lights Go Out, the title track, Do You Want to Start a War, and other great stuff. I mean, this album definitely shows that Fozzy is not just one of those flash-in-the-pan bands just from their famous lead singer, but they can play, and Jericho can sing his ass off, and that is why it made the list. Number 17, Obituary, Inked in Blood. Now, when I made my first list a couple weeks ago, I did have it in the top 10, but after hearing it again, I kind of felt I was a little bit too nice on the review I did, but still, it was still a great album. It's just the replay value kind of waned for me a little bit, but still, for Obituary's return album, it was still a really good CD. And there you go. Number 16, Unearth with Watchers of Rule. For a metalcore band, Unearth is definitely one of those very good ones. I mean, that is consistent. They don't go over the top with any metalcore cliches like crazy amounts of breakdowns and stuff like that. When the metalcore bands I listen to, they don't emphasize on breakdowns like Killswitch Engage. If you want to count Shadows Fall, even though I don't really count them as metalcore, or As I Lay Dying, or Unearth, pretty much those, and Bleeding Through, those are the kind of metalcore bands that I don't believe overemphasizes so much on breakdowns. They may have one or two here and there for unique parts, but not all the time. But with Unearth, these guys were showing a lot of a melodic death metal / thrash metal influence into their sound. And that's why I really enjoyed for this particular release, because Unearth's just able to show that they could play more than what they're being labeled as. Number 15, Devin Townsend's Z2 Sky Blue Dark Matters. While it's a double album, and some people would rather split them up into two separate albums, I decided to put them both together because Sky Blue was one of those very great, beautiful, progressive metal / prog rock kind of albums where you have a whole lot of soft moments. Excuse me. Where you have a whole lot of soft moments that just want to get you going. But Dark Matters, with the whole Ziltoid story and having Chris Jericho be a guest on there with heavy, fast songs and a progressive structure, holy shit, Devin Townsend's so good. I mean, he's such a creative genius when it comes to progressive metal and heavy metal as well. I mean, with considering all the other projects like the Devin Townsend Band, Devin Townsend Project, his solo album, Strapping Young Lad, Dev Lab, so many things. Number 14, Arch Enemy War Eternal. For their first album to feature Elisa, formerly of The Agonist, who, oh my goodness, Elisa, one of the, definitely I'd say right now, the most beautiful heavy metal chick in the world right now, or at least up there with people like from the chicks from Butcher Babies, Lizzie Hale, Amy Lee, and so many others, but Elisa was just able to give out a very good performance with her vocals. I can't really say at the moment that she's better than Angela, because their next album is going to be the album where it's going to be determined. But this album was a great, great CD, and I still listen to some of this stuff to this day, like songs like You Will Know My Name, Time is Black, As the Pages Burn, bunch of Never Forgive, Never Forget. So many great songs on this album, and I really, really loved it. Number 13, Mastodon, Once More Round the Sun. This was a great album that continues on their experimentation from The Hunter, and I really loved The Hunter. While I didn't really like this album as much as The Hunter, I still liked it a lot. I really thought this was a great CD. I mean, songs like Chimes at Midnight and The Diamond in the Witch House, and so many good songs, and The Mother Lode. And the music video to The Mother Lode was pretty damn cool. But Mastodon, they've kind of been falling down on my lists ever since Crack the Sky, because I still feel Crack the Sky, which I have in my collection, is an untouchable achievement. They can come close and still put out great CDs. And The Hunter I really liked a lot, and that was up in my top 5 in 2011. But with this one, it's at number 13, so it didn't quite make it. But still a great album. I still expect great stuff from them in the future. And there you go. Number 12, Cannibal Corpse, The Skeletal Domain. This was the year for death metal. And Cannibal Corpse, The Skeletal Domain, their first album since Torture came out in 2012. Working with producer Mark Lewis worked out for them, and they have a very unique album cover too. It's not overly gory, it's not simple, it's just a cool little crazy scene or scenery going on with like a skeleton mountain and stuff, like a skull mountain or something like that, with a bunch of skeletons and blood and stuff. But this album was just killer, just an absolute kick-ass CD. I mean, just brutality beyond repair. That's the best way to describe this particular album. Number 11, Flying Colors, Second Nature. Now, for Flying Colors, a Mike Portnoy side project band, this album was an amazing progressive rock / metal release. I mean, you got some metal moments on here, no doubt, but it's mostly harkens back to like the old school prog rock sound, but you do have a lot of heavy metal components to it, particularly from Mike's influence, and the Morse Brothers too, because they were part of like Deep Purple, I believe, and Kansas, a classic American prog hard rock band. But this album was just an amazing structured disc. I mean, I just really, really liked how this album was presented. Number 10, we get into the top 10, and wow, we're really rolling here. Number 10, Revocation with Deathless. For a newcomer band that has only been around for just a few years and have already put out some damn good releases, Revocation's able to show their thrash metal / technical death metal sound and are able to just make some great intricate music. Like, this band really reminds me a lot of the Switzerland progressive thrash band Coroner, because they're playing their stuff complex but fast too. Like, it's just very well structured stuff. And their album last year, their self-titled album last year, was very well acclaimed, and they came back with this album, and this album really just picks up where their last album left off. So, and that is why it made the list at number 10. Number 9, Machine Head, Bloodstone, and Diamonds. This is an album I just reviewed recently, and wow, this was a great album. I mean, just interesting stories going on throughout each song, and just great songs in general. And Rob Flynn's able to show to the world that he's more than just a typical heavy metal gruff vocalist. He can actually sing. And that's what he did for some moments on this particular release. There we go. Still got a little sneeziness. But anyways, number 8, Overkill with White Devil Armory. This was a great thrash release. I mean, Overkill's been on a roll for the past 4 years. I mean, the Electric Age, which was a great thrasher piece that came out in 2010. 2012, you had, it was Ironbound in 2010. The Electric Age came out in 2012. It was still a great album. But White Devil Armory, I think, topped Electric Age, but not quite as good as Ironbound, but still a great album nonetheless. I really, really liked what this album was able to do. And Bobby Blitz Ellsworth's voice still soars. Number 7, Aborted the Necrotic Manifesto, one of the 2 2014 albums I own in my collection right now. But Aborted, just able to bring out their brutal death grind influence, where they're combining the speed and intensity of grindcore with the brutality, complexity, technicality of death metal, with a little bit of a melodic death metal influence on guitar solos at times, whenever it would get melodic in the background while the solo was going on. But this album was just a brutal gore fest, beautifully flown together CD. I mean, with such brutal songs and the Hellraiser audio samples in between. It was just really, really cool. This was a great album. Number 6, Job for a Cowboy, Sun Eater. Now, this was an album, another one I reviewed recently. Job for a Cowboy have arrived. I mean, these guys have evolved over the course of their career, where they started out as a deathcore band, then became more of a straightforward death metal band. Now they're going into technical death metal territory, where this album, in a way, kind of reminds me a lot of the 90s albums from Death, where you hear the technicality within their own work. And that is why it is number 6. Number 5, Behemoth the Satanist, for another return album after 5 years of struggles, delays, and also Nurgle's leukemia issues that he got cleared of. They come back with an album like The Satanist, where they're bringing back some of their black metal roots into their death metal sound, where after like the early 2000s they became straightforward death metal. They're bringing back some black metal influences within the lyrics and Nurgle's vocals, where it mixes in with the deepness of the death metal growls he can pull off. So this is a great blackened death metal release. And another death metal album. I mean, gosh, let me count already. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 death metal albums already on this list. This was a great year for death metal. Number 4, Opeth Pale Communion. For what Opeth's been trying to do over the last few years, with how they've moved away from progressive death metal into trying to bring back some old school 1970s prog sounds into their music. And while they still play the death metal stuff live, they've just really been trying their best to bring back 1970s prog rock. There's still a little bit of heaviness to it, but more in the sense of like 70s to early 80s Rush kind of heaviness to it. But this album was just an absolute amazing CD to get into. I mean, I'd say better than Heritage, even though Heritage was still a really good release. Pale Communion topped it, and I'd say they're going to get a little bit heavier each album. This album was way heavier than Heritage, but it wasn't really what they were trying to... It wasn't like their heaviness of their previous albums like Blackwater Park or even Ghost Referees. But maybe their next album, they'll get a little heavier but stay clean vocals for Michael Ackerfeed. Number 3, Triptychon, Milana Chasmata. Wow. Tom Moyer, after the unfortunate split of Celtic Frost, he brings out a new band with Triptychon where it continues on the sound of the last Celtic Frost album, Monotheist, but expand on it each and every album Triptychon does. This is only their second CD. When their first album came out in 2010, it was highly acclaimed by a lot of people, and rightfully so. But this album, wow, just an amazing CD right here. Just some great gothic, doomy, heavy metal right here with a little bit of a death metal influence in there, with like the guitars, sounds, and the vocal approach Tom Moyer is able to do, where it's close to a death metal growl, but it's more like a brutal, deep shouting kind of thing. But very dark, gothic imagery, and very doomy kind of stuff. But this album was just amazing. Great stuff. Loved it. And I don't really need this anymore. Now, let's get into number 2. Number 2, At War with Reality by At the Gates. This was a highly anticipated album for any metal fan. Because this was the first At the Gates album to be released in 19 years, ever since the classic Slaughter of the Soul. And Slaughter of the Soul is one of those all-time classic metal releases. When after that album came out and At the Gates split up, they thought if they ever came back together, they probably weren't going to make a new album. 2007, when they got back together for reunion shows, they said they wouldn't make any new songs, but then Thomas Lindbergh back last year, he went, "Never say never. We may make new music," and indeed they did with this album. And wow, this album, while it's not up to the same league as Slaughter of the Soul, I would say this is a close second to Slaughter of the Soul. This album was just a beautiful melodic death metal album where they harken back to that style. And when this was the band that really launched what melodic death metal became, even though it gets repetitive at times, because a lot of bands in the metalcore scene kind of take what they do and put it into their sound. At the Gates is one of those bands that can still do it and still make their version of it still feel fresh to this day. But yeah, with that album, the boys are back in town, practically. Hopefully they make another album, and we'll see how they can do with another release. But it was a very close second on this list. But then that leaves us with number 1. This is an old favorite, a big favorite of mine, where still it's an album that just has not escaped me. I still pop it in my computer or anything else and just jam out to it. Number 1! You knew it was coming. Accept, Blind Rage. This was an album that came out during the end of the summer months. And wow. Whenever there is no new Iron Maiden albums, or Saxon, or Raven, or Diamond Head, those classic new wave of British heavy metal bands, you could look to over the last few years with Accept, their third straight comeback CD. I mean, the return of Accept has been one of the coolest, most pleasant, and great surprises in the world of heavy metal in the last decade. I mean, with the return they had with Blood of the Nations, a great album there, and then another great album, Stalingrad, even though people thought it was a bit of a middling effort, it was still a damn solid release. But Blind Rage takes what they were able to do in the last 2 albums, but push it one step further, and really topped both albums tenfold. This album, when you have songs like Wanna Be Free, Trail of Tears, Fall of the Empire, From the Ashes We Rise, The Curse, Final Journey, Bloodbath, Mastermind, oh my god! This album was just an absolute tremendous roller coaster ride, and a great one. I mean, where you're going up with the fast songs, and then you're going down the tracks on a beautiful, with the slower tracks where it just sounds absolutely incredible. I mean, wow. Mark Tornillo's voice is one of a kind, and just Andy Sneap's production is just immense on this CD. This is an album that every fan of rock, metal should check out, because this album, one of those old school late 70s, or really just mostly in the 80s, just really showing that they could still put out great music. This new Accept have been putting out probably their best work ever. Or maybe close to, Restless and Wild and Balls to the Wall and Metal Heart. But I'd say, in my opinion, Mark Tornillo's a way better singer than Udo Darkschneider. No doubt. While Udo was good for his time, and I know that there are purists out there who say, oh, if Accept don't have Udo, they suck. It's your call. But Udo doesn't want to have anything to do with Accept, and he's fine with it, and he's doing his own thing. So, yeah. Bravo to you, Accept. And also, bravo to At the Gates, too. And bravo to every band I mentioned. And like I said, during the times I was saying each album, there's an annotation over here for you to click on the reviews, watch the reviews for yourself. But I actually want to know your lists. Leave them in a comment or make a video response. What was your album of the year for 2014 in the world of hard rock heavy metal? I'd love to know. But anyways, guys, that's going to do it for one of two videos that are considered to me important for my channel. The top 25 with 5 honorable mentions album of the year list. But the second video is still yet to come. The top 15 WWE pay-per-view matches of 2014. But that video is going to be coming out after TLC. But have a good day.